How do you start a podcast? Go!
Yeah, you've muted yourself.
I did mute myself to test my own recording. Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Sarah Stockdale.
I'm Andrew Corway.
I'm Rick Vieweg.
I'm the token American, Tommy Guy. And this is Pagenerd.
I just got so giddy. Oh my God. Welcome, humans and like dog-sized spiders, to this episode of Pagenerd. Today we are listening to Andy Weir's Hail Mary, which is apparently a really sexy astronaut movie written as a book that we had varying degrees of love for. And we are so excited to spoil this book for you.
And if you're in some weird future world where you've seen the movie and want to hear about the book, that's also a good reason to listen to this episode.
Oh, good point. Welcome from the future. There's a movie now. We don't know how it went. You're going to hear a big theme in this. This was a screenplay. This was not a book.
Yeah, Andy Weir wrote The Martian before this. That got, who was in that? Matt Damon?
That's right.
Yeah, he's good at getting hot, basic white boys.
I feel seen. Why are we here? What is Pagenerd?
Yeah, how do we know each other? What was Pagenerd and what is it now?
Okay. What was Pagenerd was a startup around like design software. And if you're like, wow, I've never used that design software, that's true. It kind of flopped.
None of us had generational wealth or anything, so like we didn't really all quit our jobs and go for it.
Maybe we should have quit our jobs and gone for it.
Yeah, we really should have quit our jobs and gone for it. But I think the story of this is kind of cool because we all worked together and hung out. I think it was every Wednesday night at Mother's Dumplings, which we lovingly called Moe's Dumps, from between 2012 and 2016. And then Richard and the other Richard, Tommy, moved away too far away to eat dumplings all the time. Tommy came back and ate dumplings with Andrew and I one night, and we ended up walking around the city talking about everything, but a lot of like books and philosophy and what's happening in our world. And we were like, hey, we really like doing this. And we all really like reading sci-fi books. And sci-fi books are also like a mirror sometimes of what is happening in our world and gives us a different lens that is maybe less depressing than our newsfeed with which to explore ideas. And I don't think we do that enough. We're like trying to outsource our thinking to machines. And I just want to know what smart, interesting, lovely people think about things, including you, the person who's listening to this right now. We want to know.
And I feel like books are just the best medium for that. So like in this episode, one of us was not picturing Ryan Gosling. They're picturing Paul Giamatti somehow, as they missed the buffness of the character, I suppose. So I think there's like a joy in and of itself, the discussion.
We're going to get like one-star review, and it's going to be Paul Giamatti and be like, didn't watch, too weird.
I haven't even described how I was going to lick his abs yet.
Do I know these people? Like, what's going on? Paul Giamatti. Sorry, if you're out there, we love you. Sarah, jump in. What is Project Hail Mary?
Okay, so this book opens with a guy waking up in a strange room. He doesn't know who he is, where he is, or why he's there. It's completely sterile. He's hooked up to a bunch of machines in all places. He's hooked up to a bunch of machines in all places, and he pulls them out.
I think there's two things that you have to learn in the first page of this book. One, this character is very buff. This is because this is a screenplay, and so he needed to be buff. The other is he has, and I quote, tubes in, I think it's more places than I can count. He then proceeds to enumerate all of the places, including his butt.
I don't think there were any new places. Like, I think it's all regular places.
He was out of places, though. Also, there's dead bodies.
Yeah, there are 2 other beds, and the people in them are so dead that they are completely mummified. And he doesn't know who they are or how they died. So you quickly get the sense that he's going to be the only voice we have for a while. The book leans really heavily into this single narrator, very kind of sassy, quippy, funny. It definitely does read like a screenplay. Like you can tell that Andy Weir sold The Martian to 20th Century Fox and had that top of mind when he was writing this. We do learn very quickly that he is in space. That would probably smell bad.
It sounds like they've been desiccated, so it's more of a jerky sort of flavor. Like, I don't think anything rotted was the point.
Allegedly, the ISS kind of smells low-key like farts all the time. So I think there would be some lingering scent.
He's got a fart tube, Andrew.
He does
That's
have a fart
true.
tube.
Oh, yeah.
The tube is taking care of this problem for us.
And there's also this robot thing sort of in the middle of the room that's taking care of all of his bodily functions. So I don't know, maybe sponge bath?
Oh, I didn't think. Yeah, there's a giant robotic arm, but there's also a robotic voice that keeps asking him basic questions like, what's 2 + 2? What is your name? And he can answer the math questions, but he can't answer any questions about himself. So it seems like he has some sort of selective amnesia, but very quickly starts trying to figure out where he is. And the way we find out that he is in space is he starts doing gravitational experiments to figure out that he's not on Earth, which to me immediately didn't necessarily seem believable because I don't know anyone, and you are all my friends in STEM, that just has these gravitational formulas top of mind and knows exactly how to conduct these experiments.
Okay, I will cop to the fact that I used to try to see if I could still do math when I was smoking weed, just to see, like, you know, where we were. But no, I think if I woke up from a mini-year coma, no, I'm not going to remember that, like, how a pendulum works.
Whoa. So I'm just curious about the experiments that you're running there.
No, it went fine. I was just, you know, like really hungry, but I could do math, like unchanged. Bottom line, like the guy, he has amnesia when it helps the plot. He doesn't have amnesia when that helps the plot. It felt just kind of a little lazy to me.
Well, they made it like the key way to introduce plot points. I don't think it's well done, but like you can tell that was one of the main maneuvers of the book.
Yeah, I think we've been introduced to two of the core storytelling devices in this novel already. One of them is selective amnesia, and the other one is competence porn. This guy can just kind of figure out anything, even after waking up from a multi-year coma, which we started thinking of this as a superpower. So if you think about Ryland Grace's superpower, and not just that he's hot and future Ryan Gosling, it's science magic. Like he can science his way out of most problems. And so he just starts sciencing his way out of these problems. And one of the more interesting and I think useful plot devices with the amnesia is we get these flashbacks. So we start to understand who this guy is. He starts to get a drip of his previous life, and that's flashed into the story so that we're given a little bit more context. We start figuring out why he's there and how he got there. So he remembers that he used to be a scientist. He is now a middle school teacher, and he remembers that there was an existential threat to Earth, a microscopic life form called astrophage that is dimming the sun. He's in a spaceship called the Hail Mary with his dead crewmates who were sent to investigate something called the Petrova problem. The whole thing kind of starts with something called the Petrova line. A scientist named Irina Petrova spots this strange arc of particles between the sun and Venus, kind of like a curved trail that just shouldn't be there. And at first, nobody knows what it is, but eventually they figure out that it's not dust or gas, it's an organism, and it's feeding on the sun. And it's draining energy directly from the sun and doing it fast enough that scientists predict the sun's output is going to drop by up to 15%, which is really bad. That's not survivable. I mean, we're worried about a 1 degree change in temperature. This is much more significant than that.
For context, the last ice age, where I think where all of us are currently, was under, like, I don't know, a kilometer of ice. That was a 0.1% drop in solar output. This is 150 times worse. So this is bye-bye Earth.
Tommy, tell us about astrophage. This is the particle that is draining the sun.
Yes, it's an organism. So it's a single-celled organism, think pond scum, that absorbs light from the sun, kind of like pond scum, with a few huge differences. One is it's completely jet black. This is important because it absorbs all of the sunlight that hits it. Fun fact, you guys know why plants are green?
Because they absorb all the sunlight except the green ones, which bounce off and hit your eye.
That's exactly right. Plants do not absorb green. Astrophage absorbs everything. And by everything, I don't just mean what we call visible light, the stuff you can see. If you put astrophage in the microwave, it would absorb that too. Kind of like chicken. It gets a sunburn. It absorbs all of the light that it hits. And this is a problem because the light doesn't get through the astrophage and therefore it's blocking part of the sun, right? This is sort of the conceit of the entire book. A few other things we should just know ahead of time about this organism. By the way, Ryland figures all of this out in like one binge of scientific experimentation as a middle school teacher. One is it absorbs all this light. What does it do with it? Well, it can use that light to move. It actually shoots light out of its butt. This will move you. This is a real thing. You probably weigh too much to get very far by shooting light out of your butt. But if you are really small, it would work. And the other you need to know is it needs carbon dioxide to breed. So it's leaving the sun where it got really hot and toasty, full of energy, shooting light out of its butt and finding the nearest CO2. Mercury has no CO2. Venus does. So they see this line of astrophage filling up at the sun, shooting light out of its butt, going to Venus, breeding, turning around and going back. And this is sort of the problem is, hey, this is a runaway curve and eventually will absorb the sun.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like you alluded to earlier, since it's going back and forth, that's where this line comes from. So that's where they're seeing that Petrova line. And since it's getting more and more, every time it goes back to the sun, there's more astrophage to block the sunlight that would get to Earth, right? So that's why it's cooling.
Wait, hold on. One quick thing, because you, Tommy and Richard explain a lot of science things, and I feel like people might be like, how do they know all of this? So how do you know all of this?
But Tommy's got credentials, so I'll let him go
I don't
first.
have the credentials. Starting,
Okay, you started
so
getting credentials.
I'm a PhD dropout who spends a lot of time on the internet. And the internet is vast, and Wikipedia is a marvel.
And I started taking physics I took it through high school and started taking university, and I was no good at the actual application of it. But I'm just a very curious person that will sit and consume a lot of content around both the new science as it's going on and old theories and how they work and how everything fits together.
And I did relatively poorly in all of these classes, but I have a degree in English and a master's in professional communications, which doesn't mean anything. All of these things are fake and made up. But I've read a lot of books and do a lot of talking about the things that I've read.
Now, you have skills in perception of like what's going on in the story, Sarah. I think you pick up on a lot of beats that the rest of us are kind of missing.
And so a question that we all might have, and we'll see how we deal with this when it is Ryan Gosling, but why is a middle school teacher who is inexplicably hot involved in this mission at all?
Not inexplicably hot. They do explain why he's hot. And he's hot because he's an astronaut. So he had to be hot. And there's more gravity, so he's got to deal with more gravity, more muscles.
Okay, so we've explained the hotness.
Yeah.
Crank up the hotness.
Now we have to explain why a middle school teacher gets to do this science magic. So we learned that the reason he's part of the mission is before he was teaching middle school, he was working in a pretty fringe corner of academia, speculative extraterrestrial biology. I don't know anyone working in speculative extraterrestrial biology. Tommy, do you?
I got to be honest, those people's grants just got cut.
Ryland, in his former academic life, published a paper on how he believed extraterrestrial life could survive without water, which got him excommunicated from academia, and that's how he ended up as a middle school teacher.
I think we should probably clarify that this paper that he wrote that got him excommunicated from science, which first of all isn't a thing. That's the religious people. That's not the scientists that excommunicate you. I just think speculative astrobiology is going to be okay with speculation.
Yes. And this is how we get our super magic science hero. Someone named Dr. Ava Stratt comes across this paper. She's been tapped for a very weird and potentially unbelievable role, which is all-powerful person to solve the sun crisis. She is basically the all-powerful person who can bring whoever she needs to into this project, give them access to whatever they need, and make things happen. So she finds Ryland Grace and taps him to come research astrophage and figure out as much as he can possibly learn about it. And he does pretty quick science magic. So he very quickly figures out how astrophage reproduces. He becomes a bit of like a star in this kind of global research push to figure out how do we stop it. And it is it is kind of that everyman hero narrative plot that is, slightly charming, slightly unbelievable, but works in this context, I think.
How early in the process of writing this did he think Ryan Gosling?
Well, the character's name is Ryland, so he's already most of the way to Ryan.
That's true.
We just threw an L in the middle.
Ryland Grace.
Ryland Grace. It's so close.
Oh, man. ChatGPT, make me a name.
I think in the movie, you're going to see Ryan Gosling wear glasses and have messy hair, the way that all the scientists in The Martian did. And that's exactly who he wanted.
But okay, so I saw the trailer, and he's too hot. I don't buy it. He's too, I understand gravitationally, he's supposed to be buff. I guess I get it, but the must hair in the trailer has a lot of gel in it for someone who is just waking up scruffy. It should be someone slightly scruffier or with less gel in their hair.
I personally think a better choice, and I kind of saw this and when I was reading the book in my mind's eye, I saw Paul Giamatti. I don't know why. I was completely off the cast.
Buff Paul Giamatti.
So opposite to what they ended up with.
Like, that's the science teacher vibe that I was thinking. And then when I spoke to you guys, like, oh, he's really hot. I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense.
I want to reread this book now with Paul Giamatti in my head.
It makes more sense. Yeah.
So one of the things that you're probably not getting from listening to this as a podcast is how aggressively jokey and sassy this narrator is. Like, constant punchlines all the time. Like, and it's pretty good. It's like pretty interesting and fun. I read it and then listened to the audiobook, and I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook because you had that kind of really jokey narrator in your head. So what we're saying is this person is a science magician. They're very hot and they're really funny. And so I don't think you get all three.
Well, like Tommy said, I think that's how it comes into being written as a screenplay, is you have to understand that this is like the perfect person.
One of the things that I wanted to go back to, so Dr. Ava Stratt comes up a lot throughout the plot of the book, and her kind of all-powerfulness is a big part of the plot. Her ability to kind of just commandeer whatever resources she needs, including eventually some really intense climate changing powers.
Geoengineering.
Yeah. Geoengineering. Thank you, Tommy. There's quite a lot of disbelief suspending happening already, but this is one of the points to me that I was like, did we just pick a woman to save the world and give her all power and every nation now bends to her will?
Yes.
So what I would have loved from this book is different perspectives. So instead of just having Ryland as the core narrator in the present and flashing back to his previous experiences, I want to know more about Dr. Stratt. I was going to say Strout, and I was like, that's incorrect. I want to know what her story is. I want a Station 11 style trilogy where we have the perspective of all of these kind of really interesting different people, but that also requires a lot more narrative lift and explaining a lot of human nature that we just don't get explanations for in this book. Okay, so I want to get us back to the plot. So we are currently with Ryland Grace. We are in space.
I can explain a little bit of why they went to space. So Tommy, just fill in the blanks if I miss anything.
Okay.
Like I said before, so the astrophage moving between Venus and the sun is emitting that Petrova line. So we studied the Petrova line. That's how we discovered there was something going on. And so that's how we know about astrophage. The next step that we took on was finding these Petrova lines somewhere else in the universe. So we got out our big, beautiful telescopes and looked all around us, saw Petrova lines existing on other solar systems around us. So we knew that astrophage had come here, or determined that astrophage had come here from somewhere around us. As we continued digging, we figured out that it has a known radius where like any solar system within another solar system range will also have these Petrova lines, except for this one outlier. And so that's why we're going to space, is we're traveling to this outlier to see why it doesn't have this line or why this line is different. Is that covered off, Tommy, or did I miss something?
Yeah, I think that's it. I don't remember if the book covers this, but another reason that you would have no Petrova line is you have no planet with CO2.
Yeah, I don't remember if they covered that or not. If it was like
be a
all the ones that would
bummer.
fit these. Yeah.
We get one shot and then we go out there, we're like, oh, this just doesn't have any planets. You can know that. by the way. This is kind of a cool thing that we know how to do in #science. You can wait for a planet to go in front of its own star. And so you're looking through its atmosphere and you can actually see what the atmosphere is made of.
So just like we talked about before, where it was the light that gets bounced off of a flower that you would see or whatever, and that's why you can see the colors of whatever light bounces off. The sunlight that comes through the atmosphere, whatever it's missing, or whatever bands are not there, is how you determine the elements of it.
This is actually how we find some planets. If you are one of those people, if we had listeners, they would be like writing in and saying, I study astrobiology. Actually, what they're doing, real, is looking for planets that go in front of that planet's star and basically looking for methane. Methane is farts. If you see methane, something farted. And like that's actually how we find life. How we would find, I should clarify, how we would find life. Hasn't actually happened.
There are some geological processes that can also create methane, but at much lower levels. So it's not like all-in-one, this is definitely life, but it's a very good indicator that there'd be something similar to our life there.
That's a very good point. Planets can fart too, but they don't fart as much.
You don't need a butt to fart. That's what I'm learning right now.
That's the tagline. Okay. Okay. So where were we? Right. So
okay. So our protagonist, sassy, hot Ryan Gosling, Ryland Grace, is headed towards this solar system without a Petrova line to try to figure out what's happening here. You know, does astrophage have a predator? Is there some way that we can stop the sun dimming? And then another ship appears. It is so cool. It is huge and steampunk vibes, and it's alien. It's definitely not from Earth. And inside that ship is the best part of this book, Rocky. And honestly, if you're me, Rocky's really objectively terrifying because he's basically a dog-sized spider, and I am horribly arachnophobic. So I did my very best while reading this to not picture a spider, but that's basically what he is. He's the size of a dog. He's got 5 arms and a body made of something that looks like rough metal. No eyes, no face in any human sense, just limbs, tools, and movement.
He's a steampunk crab. So I also don't love spiders, so I just decided to go with crab because he has sort of a rock exoskeleton. And the other weird thing about this dude, Rocky, is Rocky lives in an atmosphere made of ammonia, which if you've ever had like really horrible smelling cleaning solutions, that's ammonia. The atmosphere is that. It's very hot where he is, and his internal temperature is higher than the temperature of boiling water. So he's just in there steaming and being Rocky and has no eyes.
Like you say, when he's steampunk, he actually kind of is steampunk, and only steam could exist. But because of the pressure and the way his body works, he has essentially 2 systems. So he's got an internal water structure that doesn't interact with the outside hot air. That's kind of how they explain this biology away.
So they need to make contact, and this part happens absurdly quickly. Both ships are kind of parked near each other facing this, and they have to figure out how to meet without killing each other. And Ryland's ship is obviously built for humans. Rocky's is built for, what are they called again?
What do we call them?
Iridians.
Iridians. Rocky is an Iridian. We don't learn this all at once, but we learn this absurdly quickly. And Rocky, we learn, is an engineer. He can pretty much build anything. So he starts to construct a flexible tunnel between the 2 ships. Think kind of like a pressurized hamster tube, but for, alien diplomacy. And they meet in this little shared space between their 2 ships, each sealed off in their own environments. But they've got a little clear window between them so they can see and hear each other. And it's a really cool kind of human alien moment. It's just 2 beings kind of awkwardly staring at each other through a plastic barrier and kind of trying to figure out how to say hello. And it's the first lovely and moving moment in the book, at least for me.
I really loved that introduction with the tunnel because it was still science magic, but it was like, it felt like the scientific method. Like Rocky, when they first met, he put up a bunch of hexagons between his ship and a Ryland ship. And he saw which hexagon Ryland interacted with. And that's how he knew that that's the one to use for Ryland. So he knew that Ryland somehow could see through it, even though Rocky couldn't see. It made Rocky seem very, very intelligent as a species. The other thing I was thinking about as we were discussing it was, how real is it that a spider or a crab would be the way that an alien species presents itself? And I think there's a lot of evidence across the different branches of the animal kingdom that a spider or crab form actually has evolved independently from one another. So if there are aliens out there, I'm sorry, Sarah and Tommy, but it might be somewhat realistic that they do take the form of an arachnid of some kind or a crab of some kind.
I love a crab. I think when you add the extra legs is when I'm completely out on the plan, and I would like to opt out of whatever version of the future we get invaded by, specifically arachnids. But if it's crabs, I'm down to clown. That sounds like fun.
I don't think that sounds fun at all. If there were just like dog-sized crabs everywhere with claws, that would be terrifying.
I'm way more here for it than like a 8-legged freaks.
Really? You're just gonna have like a big old tub of butter and just be like, bring on the crabs?
It sounds both delicious and adorable to me.
Adorable crabs. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But if they're as smart as Rocky, it'd be hard to boil them because they're steampunk crabs.
It's true. How would you boil a creature whose insides are already hotter than boiling water?
How do we eat Rocky is what you're
How
asking.
do you eat Rocky?
Oh, see, now we're getting somewhere.
Honestly, if you're Ryland Grace, first thought is how do I fuck it? Second thought is how do I eat it?
Yeah.
This is why I'm so glad it's not us. Because if you think about it, like this is some of the most like lovely and gentle alien contact that we've ever had in a narrative. Like normally we're trying to immediately kill it. And that is not even something that crosses Ryland's mind. That's not part of this at all. There's just this like wonderful positive assumption that like we're already friends and we're just trying to figure out how to communicate, which is not human nature at all when we are introduced to something new and scary.
Yeah, not writ large, but I think from a personal point of view, it works for Ryland. It works to his character throughout the rest of the book.
Yeah, he's very curious.
Yeah.
And really this saved the book to the extent it was saved, is like the sort of the bromance between Steampunk Crab and Ryland. You know, they almost immediately hit it off. They learned to communicate within, time is weird in this book, but I think within days. And it's a wonderful bromance story from that point on.
We should talk about how they communicate.
Yeah, sure. So one of the early ways that they start communicating is, of course, with gestures. So Ryland will be putting thumbs up and shaking his head and stuff like that. And then those gestures can't be mirrored very effectively by Rocky. During the initial part of the meeting, there's like a little robot on the side of Rocky's ship that like returns the same sort of gestures. But Rocky himself doesn't have the same sort of anatomy as Ryland. So I have to come up with different ways of communicating the same ideas. Where Ryland would give a thumbs up, I think Rocky does jazz hands, is how it's described. So like we start off with these early gestures, and it's a cute way of doing it, and I think plays back into being written as a screenplay. Is just like seeing this little crab do a jazz hands thing is going to be very fun to see on screen.
So this creature has no eyes. It can hear well. In particular, it can echolocate, which is what bats do. Right, they can hear sounds bouncing off of other things and form sort of a picture in their head of what's out there. I don't recall if it taps. You would think hard creature, it would like tap a lot to produce sound to echolocate. I don't know. The cool thing though is it can communicate audibly, and it does this with what we would call chords. Right, so instead of sort of one note, think of like a piano. You play 3 notes at the same time, and those 3 notes mean something. So pretty quickly, Ryland realizes that there's chords coming from this creature, and probably it's trying to communicate. So he whips up a natural language translation program and Excel. We should say this spaceship has been equipped with every program ever written. He burns like 3 lines in the book to describe that they somehow got around copyright violations. They have everything. And of all the things on his spaceship, he decides to use Microsoft Excel. Full disclosure, I work at Microsoft. Everything I'm about to say is definitely not their opinion. Excel is definitely the best program ever written. It basically runs the entire economy. Do not use it for science. There's a paper out there in genetics that was retracted because they did the science in Excel, and Excel is not for science. It's definitely not for translating languages. He had other tools for this, but he chose Excel. That's fine. I'm sure Microsoft will pay for this in the movie. So good job going after the big company. But he does code up, handy dandy, genius at everything, just whips up a little natural language translation program and then starts listening to the chords. And when he recognizes one, he'll plug it in like, oh, he, gestured this way and that was this sound. And so that must mean like right. And this other gesture means left. And they sort of figure out how to count. They figure out the names for various things, stars, things like that would matter if you're in space. And go pretty immediately from left, right, stars, up, down to let's communicate about our past.
When you listen to the audiobook, you can kind of hear the chords behind the translation, which is just like a nice effect to hear Rocky. But after a few sessions, they're like naming things and asking questions, and then they're making jokes. And like somehow we have a full alien translation, which happens incredibly quickly.
Yeah, this was the thing that, I was really into the Rocky chapters and I was into super into the tunnel science. And then when they got to this, going from Excel to a speak aloud Shazam type alien conversion, I was, okay, it's fiction, but it kind of took me, it was like a bridge too far. I immediately texted Tommy, is this possible? Is it conceivable that this could happen? And I think, Tommy, you said you could create a crappy database kind of the sounds, but you shouldn't do that.
My initial read was like, okay, this is pretty dumb. First of all, again, don't use Excel. But then Ryland very quickly basically memorizes all of these sounds and doesn't speak, but can listen to Iridian. And actually, the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. And the reason is, if you were to speak a language I've never heard, I will recall basically none of it. But if you play me a song, it's amazing how fast a song can stick in your head, right? Literally, you hear it once, you hear it 5 years later, and you're like, oh, I recognize this, right? It's a thing you do. Well, other people do at trivia. I'm still bad at that. I don't speak for myself here. But someone, if you're perfect, like Ryan Gosling, Ryland Grace, you hear a song and you remember it. And if somebody were to play a song and point left, and then every time they play the song, they mean left, I think you would actually learn that pretty fast.
And it goes into like humans when they're immersed in another culture, you pick up a language more quickly. Like that's what it's playing on. So like that's what they're trying to make happen.
I did think how the computer translated Rocky's vocals, so how Andy Weir actually wrote Rocky's lines based on the translations in this broken English actually was quite charming.
Yes.
But the way that we got there seemed just a bit too magical for me.
There's cute little quirks to Rocky. Like every time he asks a question, it says question at the end. He's so endearing so quickly with the way his language is described and how he speaks. It's very strange how quickly, like one of the things I'll say about Andy Weir as an author is like, I friggin' loved this crab so fast. I hadn't even decided whether or not I liked Ryland yet. And we're like chapter 27. But I absolutely love Rocky. He becomes the emotional core of the story. It feels like, a much colder book if this character hadn't been introduced in this way, even though there are all these like, we're still aggressively suspending disbelief in like 900 ways now with Excel.
Yeah, and he always uses amaze at the end of things. He's excited about stuff. Amaze. Hearing
Yes.
Rocky do that in the book's like very endearing, along with the alien jazz hands.
It's so cute. And they're both trying to solve the same problem. Both of their planets are being impacted by astrophage. They are both going to this system Talseti to figure out what's protecting it from astrophage. So that's why they're both there. And the deeply improbable thing at least has a little bit of an explanation. So the reason why the Petrova line isn't dimming in Talseti is the thing that's protecting it from the astrophage. There's a second microorganism living there. It's a predator they call it Talmiba. One of the things that they love is just naming stuff. They get to name so much stuff, and scientists love to name things. So that's just a delight for Ryland. So unlike anything back on Earth, it's actually eating the astrophage. That's why Talseti is in balance. The predator is kind of keeping this balance. So this is a huge breakthrough for both Ryland and Rocky. That's the whole reason they were sent there, is to figure out what can stop astrophage, and they have it. So now they have to figure out how to turn this alien microbe into a practical solution that can save their planets.
there's this huge action sequence of them having to like dip down the atmosphere to gather up this tau amoeba, and everyone almost dies, and Ryland has to work really hard using his big muscles to pull this rope up. So like that action scene will play out beautifully in the screenplay. Not very much required for the science of the book.
And this is where Rocky almost, well, everyone almost dies, but Rocky almost dies.
That's true. Rocky saves his new best friend. We should say, poor Rocky. Rocky is alone, just like Ryland is. He had like 20 shipmates, and they all died. And to me, this was like the saddest part of the book. Rocky's species, really whole planet, doesn't know about radiation. Right? Radiation will make you sick. It will also give you a sunburn. It's the same stuff, just different wavelength. Can you guys tell I'm a little sunburned right now? I've been thinking about the sun.
Had a beautiful glow, Tommy.
Yeah.
Beautiful glow, man.
Too much glow. So they don't have that problem because they have a very thick atmosphere. What do we know about astrophage? It absorbs radiation, right? So Rocky's in the back of the ship doing mechanical things the entire trip out to Tau Ceti. All of the pilots and astronauts and like the buff Ryan Gosling space crab, they all die because they're out in the part of the ship that is not surrounded by astrophage, which is the fuel. So poor Rocky, all of his friends die for reasons he doesn't understand. He makes a new friend, and then he almost dies saving his life. And it's sweet.
Yeah, and so it's because we see by absorbing the electromagnetic spectrum, that's why, like, part of why it was easy to figure out radiations, because we can see it hitting the atmosphere and stuff like that with the Aurora Borealis. So it's something that we were able to investigate, but they weren't able to because it's not the way their visual system is wired, and it's just not because of the atmosphere. They wouldn't be able to experience that. So the way the humans solved it to travel is they just made the entire outer layer of the ship astrophage. So that way there's no radiation that we have to worry about. Rocky's team didn't do that.
There was a moment where they shared, after Rocky almost died, where Ryland Gosling was sharing what color looked like with Rocky, and I thought that was really sweet. Also kind of sad to think that the whole entire species doesn't know what like space looks like and how beautiful it can be. Like, think of just all of the pictures that come back from the telescopes we have out in space. And yeah, I thought that was a kind of a cool device, and it kind of really bonded them.
And eventually Rocky builds something that can absorb the visual spectrum light and display it on like a braille-ish display so that he can bounce waves off of it to understand how things visually represent. So that's something where we talked about Ryland's laptop earlier. So the laptop obviously has a screen, which Rocky can't interact with. It's just a flat plane. He can't bounce things off of it to get information. So he builds this essentially camera that translates it into bumps that he can make heads or tails of.
That was cool. And that actually exists. There's been research on this.
What?
A bunch of researchers somewhere, I'll have to look up, they built something to work with blind people that would take a visual scene and basically make like a really low resolution view of that and put it on a thing that sits under your tongue.
Under your tongue?
None of us were expecting the under the tongue.
Yeah. It's like the most sensitive spot on your body. And they were able to get people to like do basic navigation and stuff by essentially your brain like really quickly is able to map that under the tongue sensation to, again, really low fidelity, but visual depiction. So could Rocky do this with sound? Yeah, actually this seems not believable because, I mean, again, steampunk crab who's never seen a computer before, but just like whipped it up. But like actually this is a thing that has been done
by many researchers over a long-term period of time.
Pagenerd doesn't have ads yet. So instead of ads, we wanted to shout out our favorite public libraries and indie bookstores. So this episode of Pagenerd is brought to you by the Toronto Public Library, where you will find me and my 4-year-old son all the time with whatever current Pixar fascination he has, going to get that specific book and reading it 4 times before bed every night. But it's not just for kids with Pixar obsessions. You can get audiobooks for your commute, study space, career workshop, language classes, community events. All of it is there. All of it is funded and for free. All of it supports literacy and democracy and community. So go check out the Toronto Public Library. It is my library and my city, and I love it so much. One of the cool things that happens, there's this big physical action scene and emotional moment with Rocky and Ryland. And then we get a flashback that is really important. He sees why he's on the ship. So up until now, we understand why he's involved in the project. That's kind of been explained to us. But he's never been an astronaut. So the reason that he is there saving the world still doesn't make any sense. And we get a flashback that finally explains this. So 9 days before the ship was supposed to take off, there was an accident. Both the primary scientists and the backup were killed during testing in a huge explosion. They were also boning. That's a part of the plot. We can skip past it, but yeah, just don't fuck your coworkers because you might both blow up.
Especially if there's literally 2 people that can do this job.
Yeah.
Don't have them fuck.
Don't fuck your coworkers.
Got to do it for the screenplay.
Screenplay, very important to have a sex scene.
Very
I forget,
important.
is the sex scene in the trailer?
Yeah,
Okay.
they it's alluded to a bunch of times. They're really going for it in the book, if you will, these 2 scientists. And none of these characters, they don't give us a lot, but memories do come back of who his kind of shipmates were and who the people were involved in the project. And we get kind of very high-level views of who these people are that he does end up grieving. But both the primary scientist and the backup who are supposed to be on the ship are killed because they're boning. And Ryland is asked to take their place. And in the twist, he refuses. He refuses the call to be the hero. He says no. He says he wasn't trained for space travel. Yeah. But
this is the payoff to him backing down from all the other things he's done in his life, why he's not a strong character throughout the book, is like, this is the big payoff is, well, he wasn't even strong in this case. Like, he's not even a big, brave astronaut.
He's not the hero. And we learned that he was actually quite cowardly and said no to this. And really because he didn't want to die. This was never a mission anyone was expected to come back from. This was a suicide mission. And Ryland Grace was not someone who was ready to be on a suicide mission. But again, we have Dr. Strat, who doesn't take no for an answer and doesn't have anyone else who can go and be the scientist on the crew. And so she sedates him before the launch. She gives him a serum to induce temporary amnesia and tells him he'll wake up on the ship. He won't remember saying no. And by the time he figures out what's going on and that he didn't volunteer, he'll be too far into it to stop.
And so there's your amnesia explanation as to why he can't remember things about himself as this magical serum that was being developed that was specifically designed to prevent him from knowing that he had turned down this trip to space.
This was a redeeming point in the book. I really loved this as a plot device because it is so consistent with his character up until this point. He's not the hero. And kind of his inner monologue is he loves the science. He's incredibly curious. He's very sassy and funny, but he is not the hero. He is someone who bailed on science and who tried to bail on the main mission of this entire book. And so
saving all of humanity. The one thing that Strat felt was her entire purpose. Yeah, he had turned down.
She would have done anything for her. And he immediately said no. And then kind of ended up here anyway. And it made me like everything about this book a lot more when we got this twist.
Yeah, it definitely pays off the points earlier where you're just like, why is this guy complaining so much? Like, why does he keep on pointing out like he's just a teacher, he's not cut out for this?
Astronaut.
Yeah,
Nope.
But no, he wasn't. Yeah. And it kind of sends him into a bit of a depressive state as well. So like it does actually have an emotional impact on him in the spaceship as well.
Yeah. There's this kind of like this framework for making likable characters in writing where you have 3 characteristics: proactivity, competency, and likability. And you have to pick 2 of those things to make, like, someone can be kind of like a quitter as long as they're a little bit competent and they're a little bit funny or they're a little bit hot or something. But I think if you do all 3 of them, you start to like character grates on you. I think they did a great job of when you found out he was kind of this chronic quitter. One, it made sense to his character, but also I think it lowered one of his, I would say, proactivity attribute, right? He's like proactive with the science, but actually, he's not going to be 10 out of 10 on that scale. And almost immediately you're like, oh, that's an interesting device. I had the same kind of reaction to Ryland not being this perfect human. So he was kind of in it for the wrong reasons, but ultimately, Strat got him there. I thought that was a really, really interesting device as well.
It's been a while since I read a book with a character that I liked less in like the first 5 pages. Like he's just like kind of douchey, has a tube up his butt and wants to tell you about it. But then you get to the end and to your point, like okay, I get it now. He's not just like cavalier hero. He's actually kind of a putz who was kidnapped and forced into a suicide mission.
Yeah, it makes him retroactively relatable.
Hey, there's the word.
Okay. So now Ryland has this realization he is not the hero. He gets into a bit of a existential depression, I would say, and it comes through in his narration, but they are still, he still dedicates himself to solving the problem and to figuring out how we harness the predator of astrophage, Talmiba, to save the world, basically. And the problem is that Talmiba, the predator, isn't very stable, and once he starts isolating it and testing it under different conditions, it starts mutating.
The problem with Talmiba is that Talmiba cannot survive nitrogen, which is a significant portion of the Earth's atmosphere. Fun fact, if you go scuba diving, that's what gives you the bends, nitrogen in your blood. Yeah, in your blood. Ammonia, the stuff that is the atmosphere of Rocky, mostly nitrogen. So that's very bad if you're trying to get Talmiba that works back in Venus or in Rocky's world. Mm-hmm. So how do you get something that is incapable of surviving in an atmosphere, capable of surviving in that atmosphere? Very slowly. Or in this book, like very quickly. You do selective breeding, basically. You just speed up evolution. And bacteria, it turns out bacteria can evolve rapidly. Ryland Grace learns the lesson that, we should just slowly increase the amount of nitrogen in the atmosphere for Talmiba, and it will, through natural selection, become used to that much nitrogen and eventually be able to survive Venus's atmosphere and Rocky's atmosphere.
Yeah, and there's a plot device for why he has all this nitrogen on board, and that's that it was the preferred suicide method for one of the other scientists that they lost. So he's got tons and tons of nitrogen because this guy was going to nitrogen poison himself to death.
But there's the other character who dies, the other pilot. I think it was a pilot. She wanted to die from heroin overdose.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really bitchin' way to go out. Just like, all right, let's see what all the fuss is about with this heroin thing.
And she specifically asked for them to give her 2 doses. The first one is the absolute perfect first dose of heroin to get high off of. The second engineered to kill her, which I immediately liked this person a lot.
Yeah, she's a rock star character all through the book.
Imagine that you're like in the mission, everybody else is figuring out things like how to make a spaceship that flies with astrophage. And it's like, okay, your mission is to get one person as high as possible.
And then kill them painlessly.
And then kill them. But I can't say this enough. Get them high first.
I would read an entire book based on that heroin cook.
I think if it were me, I don't know if we planned to talk about this, but I would just want it to do the thing that happened to those guys that visited the Titanic. Just like
crushed by pressure.
I don't think it lasted long.
You could just go into Rocky's atmosphere. That's it.
Exactly. Just go hang out. I mean, it would smell like when they're cleaning the bathroom, but worse, and then you would die.
Oh God,
that's not great.
I want to do what Ryland did. I want to survive. I mean, spoiler alert.
Oh, spoiler alert. Okay, we mentioned this.
Huge spoiler alert.
This is a spoiler alert. We didn't talk about the suicide mission thing, but yeah, it's a suicide mission.
We really should have.
Well, it's pretty simple. They didn't gas up the car, right? They couldn't take enough fuel, which is astrophage, to get all the way to the Tau Ceti and turn around and come back. In a very convenient plot twist, Rocky's people care about Rocky more, apparently, and gave him enough astrophage to get home. And so he had so much, he gave Ryland some. And so Ryland went from this is a suicide mission to, oh, I get to go home.
So can somebody please explain what happens when they take their nitrogen-resistant, properly bred Talmiba back onto the ships?
Okay. So basically they end up, first of all, Rocky, who was damaged when he saved Ryland, ends up coming back to life. So he's able to be saved, and both of them end up breeding enough of this nitrogen resistant Taumiba that they can survive in both the atmosphere of the planet they need to around Earth and the planet they need to around Iridani. So now they both get to go home with their little bit of Taumiba, and everything's going to work out perfectly.
And there's this really like rom-com moment where Ryland just watches Rocky's ship. There's nothing really preventing him from just seeing this light. And he watches it, and then before it's supposed to, it goes out.
And that's when there's an emergency on Ryland's ship where he gets a Taumiba outbreak. One of his breeders is leaking Taumiba into the rest of his ship. So he has to discover which one of these things is leaking and how it's leaking.
And he realizes his friend is going to die and not be able to get his entire planet is not going to survive because they can't get the Taumiba back, and Rocky will die. So he has a choice. He can either continue his mission and head back to Earth, or he can leave and help save his friend and save his friend's world. And based on everything we know to be true about Ryland up until this point, you would assume he would take the easy way out and head back to Earth and save himself. Dying was his big fear that prevented him from being able to be heroic in the first place. If he saves his friend, he will die because Arid does not have anything that can feed Ryland Grace. He cannot eat Rocky's food. It is a plot point that we glazed over, but there is nothing for him to eat. He will run out of his own food and he will starve to death. And so choosing to help his friend and save his friend's planet means Ryland Grace starves to death. It doesn't mean that Earth dies because he can send these beetles back with the information and the scientists on Earth can figure it out. They were going to put all of the information onto these terabytes into these tiny ships that are powered by astrophage and don't have to worry about not killing astronauts. So they can go incredibly quickly, much faster than Ryland's ship, and send them back to Earth. He can save Earth and his friend's planet in sacrifice of himself. And so this is kind of the emotional way at the apex moment.
Yeah, and the big redeeming arc for Ryland, right? He finally doesn't make the cowardly choice. Even though he thought he didn't do it earlier, he did make a cowardly choice before. He finally gets to be brave. So he sends the beetle off, and he starts beelining for where he last thought he saw Rocky's light flash out, or where he could establish the point in space would be from there. Then he makes some sort of radar system, again, puts something together where he has to like flash his engines and then quickly spin around. And finally, he's able to reestablish contact with Rocky.
And our Tom Cruise character, our kind of asshole coward, is fully redeemed. He saves his friend, who's all of our favorite steampunk character. And so he stays behind to help him solve the mutation problem. He has to, bioengineer the Taumiba again, and he figures it out. Science, magic, poof, waves a magic wand. And he has to travel back with Rocky. That is the sacrifice that he has made, and he knows that he's going to die, and he has to tell his friend that he's going to die.
But he doesn't die.
Tommy! Spoiler!
We're at that point.
How dare you spoil that he lived, Tommy?
He lives.
If
How
you
dare
made
you
it
spoil
this
that?
far,
He's too hot. We can't kill him.
he's too hot. Ryan Gosling does not die in movies.
No, he's too
Is that
hot.
true? Fact check that. Pretty sure he doesn't die.
No, I don't think he dies in
I
movies.
don't think he dies.
No.
Yeah. So instead, honestly, maybe worse, he lives in a bubble made of clear xenonite under immensely thick clouds eating, I think synthetic hamburger.
Ryland burgers. They're able to kind of biopsy his muscles and create food
Yes.
for him. So he's kind of cannibalizing himself in a very sciencey way. And he really likes his Ryland burgers, is what he calls them.
As part of a plot point, he does have some like nutrient sludge to survive on while they engineer these burgers for him.
He eats the Taumiba, I believe, which he goes out of his way to describe as like poo-like.
The guy has a butt thing. It's a
Yeah,
thing.
it's
Yeah.
pretty good. Yeah.
He does, yeah. So he luckily has a lot of muscle, so they biopsy his muscle.
So many muscles.
So many muscles. One
So
less because they
hot.
take part of it and they turn it into even more muscle, but not in his body. They just feed him himself in a fishbowl on another planet for a while.
And Rocky comes to visit sometimes.
It's kind of lovely because the book ends with Ryland going into a classroom and teaching a class of steampunk crabs.
I love the ending. I thought it was really like he can tell by the light of his sun starts increasing. So the beetles, the little spaceships on the back of his ship that he shot back have worked because now the sun's shining brightly again. But I thought it was interesting how I really liked how the entire time he was like, no, I got to get back because I want to teach my kids. And he really just liked being his teacher, this failed scientist. And he actually ended up doing exactly that, just not where he thought.
I think if I'm Andy Weir as well, I don't want him back on Earth. There's so much explaining to do back on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
So this is, it's a lovely narrative arc. He has his redemption story. He gets to save his friend. And also me, Andy Weir, the author, I don't have to do any explaining. I can just leave him.
End this book and get paid.
Yeah.
And also, Ryland can't see or experience anything on the alien planet because he's stuck under this dome.
Yeah.
So you don't have to explain any of that either.
There could be, okay, my dream, not really a dream, I don't know. But if he wrote a book that was one of the middle school students narrates the sequel on Earth, I might read it. I got to close with one thing. I was thinking this morning about the law of conservation of energy and realized that I think there's like a kind of a science hole. And Rick, correct me if this sounds crazy. Okay, so we know what happens is they send Talmiba back to Earth in the little beetle thing. Somebody on Earth quickly figures out, oh, we should take this stuff to Venus. They take it to Venus. They let it just live in the atmosphere in Venus and eat astrophage. Okay. The law of conservation of energy says that energy does not get created or destroyed. It has to go somewhere. So what's happening is we're taking some chunk of the sun's energy and we're putting it on Venus. That's my read of the situation.
Yes, you would end up with all this energy that is right now locked in the astrophage, which would have to go somewhere. And so again, they don't explain how the Talmiba digest this and diffuse it into the world, but it would need to diffuse somewhere onto Venus.
So I did a quick back of the envelope calculation. If 0.1% of the sun were redirected via astrophage consumption to Venus, it would vaporize Venus. Venus would be no more. And all of the CO2 that is currently in the Venetian atmosphere would turn into carbon monoxide and oxygen. Therefore, there would be no more astrophage. So what would happen is you would vaporize the planet. Astrophage would be like, I need some CO2 to breed. Where's the next source?
Not Mercury.
Oh no. It would look at Earth. It would get to Earth. If there's any Talmiba left, it would boil the oceans from all the heat that gets absorbed. So instead of freezing to death, I think we're going to die.
Well, but on the bright side, that we don't have to deal with what Andy Weir has already established. You don't need a butt to fart, Tommy.
You don't need a butt to fart.
Thank you for listening to Pagenerd. If you'd like to read along for our next episode, we'll be covering Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. There's alternate universes and romance and kidnapping, kind of like a sci-fi thriller version of Sliding Doors. Pagenerd is Rick Vieweg, Tommy Guy, Andrew Corway, and me, Sarah Stockdale. The producer is Jay Coburn. Thanks for listening.
Can you use any of that?
Are we doing anything?
This is an entire podcast of outtakes.
The room is half full because of all the shit on the cutting room floor.